Hello and welcome to the round so far for round two. I'm Xander McGuire. I'm joined by Kate McCarthy. All of this, of course, brought to you by our friends at AAMI. But we're not going to waste any time getting into what is a massive storyline that has just unfolded at Marvel Stadium. A week, it's a long time in football, Kate, and the Saints have proved that tonight.
It certainly is, and I was really harsh on the Saints last week for their lack of defence, their lack of effort, and this one, it was just chaos in the fourth term. These are some of the opportunities that Geelong had late in the game. 41 points down in this game to fight back, and this was a huge moment. At first thought, we thought this was actually a goal from Brad Close. On the close-up, it was Wanganeen Malera who got the boot on it in the end. Some squaring kicks, some courage, huge efforts from St Kilda defenders, and then just a few opportunities missed really late from Geelong, but this game had it all. It was very close, and St Kilda, they hung on at the end. Just a few opportunities, as I said, that if they had them back, I think they'd square them up, but all credit has to go to St Kilda for their ability to bounce back from last week.
St Kilda and Ross Lyon coach teams have always been quite strong defensively, and that was no different today. But it was really the one percenters that proved the difference for the Saints. Take us through some of the vision that you've identified and some of the stats as well. Yeah, well,
I think the most important part of this is their rebound from last week. So my concern with the Saints last week was their defence. They had a lot of outs in the front half of the ground, but I didn't think their defence in any part of the ground was good enough. And then you reverse that to this week, and this is exceptional. It's full-length spoils and smothers. It's getting in front. It's just pushing your opponent off the ball, arm across, and just making your life difficult for your opponent. And this one here, Cal Wilkie, moments before this, he was crunched. You can see him. He can barely move. He's been able to get a hand in there and affect the ball going forward late in the game to save a scoring opportunity. And that's the sort of stuff we've come to see from the Saints. It's not the stuff we saw last week, but that was clearly an anomaly.
A lot of great team defensive efforts and a lot of one percenters as we just went through, but there was one clear Saturday king, as we're going to call it for the rest of this season. Your Saturday king, yes. Jack Macrae.
Yeah, Jack Macrae is my Saturday king this week. Just having a look at some of these highlights, but the numbers that stand out. Yes, 35 disposals. He had 9 clearances, 10 score involvements. He often gets really criticised that his possessions or his ability to work the ball forward doesn't have an impact on the game. Well, it definitely did this week. His ability to get his arm across, and then this here, beautiful clearance, lovely lowering of the eyes and kick forward. He had 10 tackles, none more effective than that one there late in the game to save the ball going inside their defensive 50.
Back at Marvel Stadium this week, the Saints, and they felt right at home as well. Let's have a look at their recent record at Marvel. How much of tonight's performance really come down to them being back on home turf?
Yeah, well, they play a very different brand of football at times at Marvel. It's their home ground. They make it a fortress. They've won their last 7. The only miss that they've had is against the eventual premiers against Brisbane. They got dominated by 85 points, but that's now 4 on the trot against Geelong too at Marvel, so they love matching up against them. I think it just gives them an ability to play a quicker game style, and it's a very unique stadium to play in, and if you can play it well, it's a big draw card to have.
The enduring headline out of tonight's game will likely be Tom Stewart. He went down early in the first quarter with what looked to be a serious knee injury. Now, Kate, you're big on the analysis of the mechanisms of injuries and what they might reveal. What can you tell us about this incident? What does it look like?
Yeah, I think this one's a clear PCL injury. There's a couple of ways to do them. One is knee straight into the turf, and that's what we've seen there. I was interested to see that he actually came back on and tested the knee out. I think it's round 2. Tom Stewart is an incredibly important player at Geelong. We saw last year how important he was to them when he got tagged, and essentially got tagged out of the game, was unable to move the ball, was unable to defend the way that they wanted to without him, and that is a big unfolding storyline.
Arguably their most important structural piece, but the man that's not far behind him is Jeremy Cameron, and he had a few issues through the game just with that left calf, and it changed his role as well.
Yeah, this is early in the game, so I'm still trying to work out whether the change of role was because they lost Tom Stewart or because Jeremy Cameron was hobbling with a calf complaint, which clearly hampered him. He could hardly move. He really couldn't get a whole lot of vertical leap about him. And he just, for someone that's so athletic, he just looked really uncomfortable for a lot of the game. Played that defensive wing role, so spent a whole lot of time behind the ball, 54% in the defensive half. And they threw him forward late to try and produce a goal. Nearly took a mark back with the flight, but he wasn't up to his best standard because I believe he was definitely hampered with something.
The other one to have a look at, particularly for the MRO coming out of tonight's game, is a Patrick Dangerfield incident in the third quarter. Hits a St Kilda player late in the contest. He's not going to like the look of that, given it's technically off the ball. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think the thing that's going to save him here is that he does make contact at first with the shoulder and then it comes up. He cops in with the elbow, obviously Ryan Burns. The other thing that will help him is the fact that Ryan Burns played out the remainder of the game. We know when the player is concussed or goes off with concussive symptoms, that really does affect the outcome. So I think he'll be okay. I think he'll get a fine, but I don't think it'll be more than that.
To the MCG, where Adelaide had their first win at the Coliseum since 2017 in an incredible 61-point victory over Essendon. Gee, they were impressive today, Adelaide, and a huge part of it was their ability to deliver the ball inside 50.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we'll talk about the pressure coming from Essendon in a moment, but you can't take anything away from Adelaide. Their two opponents that they've had in the first two rounds, they've absolutely blown off the park. Important performance for them to get a win at the MCG. As you said, Xander, haven't won there since 2017. They took 129 marks, 63 inside forward 50. 63 inside 50s and 20 of those resulting in marks, and their ability to connect with one another forward of the footy. Whether there was pressure or not, they were still able to hit targets, and their three forwards, if you're going to give them this much space to lead up and hit targets, they are going to be very dominating throughout this season.
As you touched on, probably a bit too much freedom given to those Adelaide forwards, and defensively, Essendon will be licking their wounds and analysing the tape because it wasn't their best day.
Yeah, well, let's be honest, this was a really, really poor defensive effort from Essendon. Highlighting a couple of efforts here, that's Dylan Shield, his direct opponent, Neil Bullen. He hedges his bets, he goes back to try and get a defensive possession, and then Neil Bullen just gets off him. This here, yes, there's a little block on Ben Keys, but that is a small forward that's kicked 3 goals in the game up until this point. He's running towards goal with no pressure. And then this one here, Saligo coming through the middle of the ground. He starts up at this contest. There is no one that goes with him. There are players that can go with him in that Essendon side. They choose not to. He runs all the way into an open goal and kicks it. And that's just something that, as an Essendon fan, you're hoping it's round 2. You're sort of seeing where are we going to be at in this season, and they dish out a performance like that. That is really disappointing. That is a very poor defensive effort from them all across the ground. We say defence, we think, oh, it's on the defenders. All 3 lines of the ground were very unaccountable this afternoon at the MCG for Essendon.
An emerging trend for the Bombers this season early is a particular over-reliance on a couple of big-name players in Zach Merritt and Jai Caldwell. Let's have a look at some of the player rankings from today. Now, this only shows the top 10, but 12 out of the top 15 players from today's game were Adelaide players, and even in a 61-point shellacking, that's abnormal. What do you make of the reliance on these two guys, and is it becoming a problem? Will it become a problem later in the season?
Yeah, well, Jai Caldwell last week was probably the beacon for them, and this week it's Zach Merritt. Like pretty much every other week we've come to know from the Bombers, he was just phenomenal. He tried his absolute best, like he does every week. And it's just one of those things. It's how many best and fairest is he going to win at Essendon? And does he want more out of his career? Because he's the only one at times that turns up for them. He kicked a number of goals this afternoon. He went forward. He played through the midfield and he gave them everything he could. He just needs a few of his teammates to jump on his back and come with him at times.
Well, it seems like Brad Scott echoed your sentiments about the defence and a reliance on a few players that are trying their heart out today in his post-match press conference.
We scored enough. We scored 25 times from our entries, at over 50%. But what's inexcusable is our ability to defend after that.
Now, a couple of points of magic today across the grounds. We're going to get to Adelaide Oval in a second, but geez, it was a great day for the South Australian teams. Talk us through this incredible goal, the moment of the round so far, from Isaac Rankin.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's just burnt off his opponent. I don't think it would matter who was chasing him at this point. He'd put the ball under the arm and tuck it. That's pretty much the junction of the 50 and the boundary line. And he's just slotted it, turns to the crowd and says, what about that one? That is a fantastic finish. And we've come sort of to expect that from Isaac Rankin because he's such a superstar of the game.
And Sam Powell-Pepper as well with another incredible goal here, probably to rival that.
Yeah, I think looking at it on first look, you'd think, yeah, Isaac Rankin's is better, and I am going to lean towards that one. But the degree of difficulty here, Sam Powell-Pepper, he has pressure sort of coming from his inside hip, which is actually directing him towards the boundary, whereas Rankin was running towards the goal, yes, at full speed, which is hard to then kick the ball from 50, but his ability to then turn his body and get that through, they're two incredible efforts from very similar spots on the ground.
Port Adelaide done by 91 points at the MCG by Collingwood, and they fought back really strongly today at the Adelaide Oval to beat an inexperienced Richmond side, but a win is a win. And stoppage-wise, they were incredible today.
Yeah, they really overpowered them at stoppage, and it's a bit of a lesson, a bit of a reality check for Richmond, who still hung in there at times. They fought back, they got some momentum swings back their way, but they really just dominated them from stoppage. It was a big turnaround, 91 points last week. They won by 72 today, but yeah, I think it was a little bit of a grounding for Richmond, but also a good response from Port Adelaide, who would have been very disappointed with their performance last week against Collingwood.
A day of two halves for Jason Horne-Francis, probably. He showed signs of being the game breaker that he really is becoming, but a couple of frustrating moments for him early in the game. Take us through his psyche and his ability to get himself out of a rut as well in this game.
Yeah, well, I think he's absolutely a competitive beast. He gets white line fever, doesn't like the treatment there, goes after him, and there's definitely a scuffle that ensues, and then he's still learning this ability, but he's definitely turned it around from his days at North, where he can actually now get himself back in the game and get his teammates back in the game as well. This is extremely selfless, hands it off, first goal in league footy, but that sort of thing we didn't see from him at North. He wasn't able to really wrestle his momentum back in a game when he'd lost his cool. Other teams would go after him and he'd go out of the game, but he put on a really nice performance. And I think we need to realise as well, there's been a bit of scrutiny about Harley Reid this week. It's similar to what Jason Horne-Francis was copying at North Melbourne, that these players, when they're 18 and 19, they need to make mistakes to learn from them. And that's the process we're seeing at the moment with Harley. His evolution will turn into what we now see from Jason Horne-Francis as well. An
unfortunate injury headline out of that game today as well. Jack Lukosius going down early in the game. Just his second game in a 6-year deal. Talk us through the mechanism of this injury, Kate.
Yeah, well, it's the PCL is the injury of the day today. There's sort of two really common ways to do your PCL in footy. Generally a bit of a ruckman's injury because of the contact knee on knee, like what we saw with Jack Lukosius there. So his looked slightly more mild than Tom Stewart, but to be honest with these ones, it's a couple of weeks or up to 3 months out if it's a full rupture. So another one that they'll be sweating on, a very small forward line as well when Jack Lukosius went out of that game for Port Adelaide. So interesting to see if they're happy to still structure up that way next week or what the outcome is for Lukosius.
Well, from that sour note to a bit of a lighter note, we're going to take a look at our AAMI clangers for the week. I'm going to kick off with Port Adelaide today. Some debutants in the middle of the song, but Willie Rioli has gone the milk shower. Forget the Gatorade shower, the milk shower, and Lachie Jones so flat. Chankot Jiath, a killer for him as well.
I'll let you take the lead on this one, Xander. I'm not too well versed with this, but it looks painful, that's for sure.
Showing some incredible courage there as well. CJ getting up straight away, but he's struggling as he keels over to get a bit of breath as well. Ben Keys.
Oh, this one. It's probably the worst kick he's had at goal that's still gone through for a goal. He can see the funny side in it as well.
Stiff to be a clanger, he's kicked a goal.
Yes, it's pretty awful, though, let's be honest.
Still a great day. And this one, Sam Draper. Wow.
Yeah, well, I think this one's a little bit of a warning for him. Absolutely, sure, go about your business the way you want. If you're going to line up like this and kick it, guess what? You're probably going to be our clanger for that week. But he went back, he slotted it. He slotted two others as well, one from a little bit further out and one from even closer, if you could believe that.
And how about the shush?
Yeah, shush the crowd, shushed us. Don't worry about it. I'll kick it how I want to, and this is how I'm going to play footy.
Speaking of crowds, an incredible crowd for Friday night football at the MCG. Footscray's 100-year anniversary of joining the league. Their biggest crowd they've ever played in front of in a home and away game, 78,000, but it was the Pies who rained on their parade.
It was, and it was ultimately the Pies' experience in close games. We saw it in their premiership year, their ability to hold on to leads, but geez, Footscray fought hard. And Tom Liberatore, the heart and soul, the Liberatore surname, for him to stand up. But this is, for me, the defensive play of the year. Bailey Williams gets up, he spoils, and then the full-length smother to get a touch on that footy late in the fourth term. Could have been the match-winning moment. Didn't happen to turn out that way for Footscray, but some really impressive signs for them as well with Fraser, the young guns, and who better but the man that ages like a fine wine, just gets better and better every time he plays. Steele Sidebottom, a phenomenal fourth term from him as well, 12 disposals and the match winner in the end. But very impressive, very mature performance from Collingwood in the fourth term to run out winners in this one.
A big talking point coming out of this game has been the umpires, which it tends to be in close games where there's a few calls late that maybe are in the grey area. Let's have a listen to what Ed Richards had to say post-game about a potential favour of one side or the other, the free kick count being 33-14 for the Pies.
I'm always one to say put the whistle away. You don't really have to get yourself involved too much if you're an umpire. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying that, but I mean, everyone wants a high-flowing, high-paced game. contests, ball spilling everywhere. I think that's when we get our best brand of footy. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't know it was that sort of 33-14. It's quite a big discrepancy. So whether or not we were just sloppy, that's up to them, but I don't think it was that bad.
33-14. What's your view on free kick counts as a metric of umpire performance?
Yeah, I think there's obviously some decisions late in that game that have come under scrutiny. People have talked about them. They were 50-50 in the grey area. We know the ones that we're talking about. The thing that I have a problem with is people bringing up the free kick count as a way to measure umpire performance. Never in a game of football has anyone said that it should be 50-50. I don't understand where that metric comes from, the idea that if we've infringed 33 times, they must have as well, so it should be even. I think there were a lot of free kicks played in that game, a pretty high number, but at no point does it need to be referenced that it was 33-14 in favour of one team or the other. I just don't think that's a way that we need to start or continue to analyse umpire performance.
Well, it was a night to celebrate tradition, as we just touched on for Footscray, but one of football's longest-running traditions now is Steel Sidebottom Scott Pendlebury playing together. 308 games and counting, breaking the all-time record for games played as teammates, and both of them were incredible on the night.
They were, and you feel like the bigger the occasion, the better these two play as well, and nothing bigger than celebrating this together. Just both of their abilities to be so clean through traffic, whether there's pressure coming or not, and some of the decisions late in the game like these, when I said how mature they were running out the game, it's these handballs or kicks that are directed towards the sideline, but you also know are probably not going to go out for that insufficient intent free kick. They're going to stay in, they're going to chew time off the clock, and your teammates up the ground know they're coming. So it helps to really stop that, I guess, free kick or the ball going back in the opposition's hand and takes time off the clock, which Collingwood are phenomenal at.
A great shot of that jumper swap there at the end of the game.
How do you feel about that, Xander?
I don't know. It's a bit startling, to be honest. You never want to see another player in the number 10 or number 22, but both at once was a lot to deal with. From those veterans, back to the young guns, Sam Darcy. There's no bigger stage than Friday Night Football at the MCG to announce yourself, and he's played some great games before, but this was huge.
Yeah, at the moment, I don't know if there's a bigger player that's putting their hand up in football, really. His ability to take the ball at the highest point, be one-on-one, have a full launch at it. It doesn't matter who's defending you. When the ball comes in like that and you're going to take it at its highest point, no one's going to stop you. We come accustomed to seeing that, but this was what impressed me the most. His ball use, so that's his non-preferred, rolling back through the corridor to open it up, and then this one, kick of the night, just lace out to a forward. That is phenomenal ball use, but for me, there's a lot of talk about a $2 million player. Who's going to be the first one? Well, if you watch that, I really would find it hard to argue against Sam Darcy being that player.
Well, he was one of many incredible youngsters on the night for the Dogs, even though they went down. And they came up against a Collingwood side that was the second oldest team to ever take to league football ground. Let's have a look at some of the inexperience, some of the outs. What did you make of the depth of the Bulldogs on Friday night and the season so far?
Yeah, well, the first thing, Sam Darcy's on that list of inexperience, so he's playing well out of his weight category in that. But Davidson, Doolan, Fraser kicked a fantastic goal. I love the move of him going through the midfield, and we see the outs, and the thing that's impressed me the most is last year with Brisbane, we saw a number of injuries to key players. In that time, they had to find someone to fill those voids. Kai Lohman, Dane Zorko went back. Those players actually probably unearthed another level to their depth, to their talent. I feel like that's exactly what's happening at the Bulldogs here. These players like Fraser, he's playing more of a role through the midfield. Doolan, Davidson, would they have played the first two games? We won't know, really. But they're getting so much experience, and that's only going to hold them in such good depth when these players come back for the Bulldogs. And the likes of Bontempelli, Treloar, Waitman in the forward line, that's going to add a lot to that Bulldogs team.
Unearthed a few young guns for sure. A clumsy incident that's made a few headlines today was Rory Lobb on Mason Cox in the last moments of the game. He's today been cleared by the MRO, and I'll read a quote from the AFL. It was the view of the MRO that Lobb made a genuine attempt to spoil and that it was not reasonably foreseeable his actions would result in a reportable offence being committed. So no further action taken on Rory Lobb today after that one. How did you see that incident in terms of, did he deserve a week? Did he deserve a fine? What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think it's a genuine football act. He's tried to spoil the ball. It's a skill in our game that is so important to the game. So I think it's the right outcome. I think the way that you surmised it just then with a clumsy football act, I think that's exactly what it was and nothing more than that.
To Thursday night, where Hawthorn went 3-0 for the first time in since 2014. And Carlton, well, they're feeling the blues once again. Michael Voss said he didn't have a problem with the way that they're running out games, but it does appear on paper to becoming an issue.
Yeah, well, they've conceded 9 goals against Richmond in the second half and then another 7 on Thursday night against Hawthorn. So for me, I think that is a bit of a concern when you're conceding that many goals and you're only scoring, I guess, inaccuracy shows as well for their 4 scores, so 2 goals 7, 2 goals 8. Just a bit of concern with their ability to, run out the fourth term. But for me, the biggest concern is still their ball use. Their ball use going forward, their ball use through the stoppage and getting the ball in to their key forwards is still a real area of improvement for them.
John Newcomb's really taken control of that burgeoning Hawthorn midfield, and he's really shaping as one of the great mid-season picks so far, taken at number 2 in that mid-season draft. Talk us through his game.
Yeah, well, to start with, I just love that him and Cripps went head-to-head for a large majority of the game. 2 really similar midfielders. Cripps has obviously got more runs on the board at the moment, but Newcomb really putting his hand up as that real in and under midfielder, but then that ability to burst away and get the advantage from his clearances, get a deep ball inside 50. I could not be more impressed with Newcomb and his ball use as well as his ground ball gets as well. Just
on ball use, you touched on Carlton's poor use inside 50, but we'll have a look at some of their use from stoppages that you've pointed out. Talk us through where Carlton went wrong.
Yeah, I just want to see them using the extra handball here. So out of stoppage, there were multiple examples where they could give the ball to a player in a better option. This one here from Doherty has a runner on the inside. Then if we look at it behind the goals, have a look at where Josh Battle's sitting. This is perfect positioning as a defender. You just want the player to kick that there because they can get back, they can assist in the air. Doherty needs to take that space, run towards him and make Battle make a decision. Here, they're just refusing to really take an easy option. They kick it long down the line and Charlie Curnow, yes, out of touch, off the beat a little bit because he had hardly any pre-season, but that's a 3-on-1, not in his favour. I think Charlie at his best would do his very best to mark that, but not last night with the form that he's in at the moment. But they're just not helping him out by putting the ball to anywhere near his advantage.
Well, 3 surgeries for Charlie Curnow in the off-season, 2 on his knee and an ankle reconstruction. As you said, wasn't at his best. Was he ready to play? Should Voss have picked him?
I'd say, we can see from this, it's not the Charlie Curnow we've come to know, regardless of how the ball's coming in. There were times it was to his advantage, he spilt the mark, but I think when you say, was he ready to play, the sooner you get him back in the team, the sooner he's going to be match fit and ready to go. So I think it's one of those 50-50s. He probably wasn't ready in the sense that if it was a huge game, they probably wouldn't have played him. But it's round 2. They need to get as much minutes into his leg. But Josh Battle, let's not take anything away from him. That effort there to work Curnow off the ball, not many players have been able to do that previously. And that's the example we saw from before. But yeah, it's sort of twofold. The ball coming in wasn't great. There were marks that we'd expect him to take that he dropped, but I think they need to be playing him, get him back to his standards, get the run through the legs because he's obviously had no pre-season from those injuries.
No Harry McCarthy with illness, a huge factor as well. If we look ahead for Carlton, how slippery can the slope get? They've got the Bulldogs next week and then a blockbuster clash on a Thursday night against the Pies. Could it go to 0-4 for them?
I think it has the potential to. Yes, we've seen some good performances from the teams they're coming up against. The one that is their chance sort of in the next 2 you'd think would be against the Bulldogs who are depleted. Their mids are up and going. Bulldogs sort of had that inexperience through there, but they're really going hard. They're getting in there. They're winning the ball. Obviously, you'd think they'd get the win there. It's a very important game for them, though. It's going to be one that needs to really start to rise their season, but there were much better signs on Thursday night than we saw the week before, but still that ball use component has a long way to go, in my opinion.
Well, 3 big games coming up on Sunday for the rest of the round. We've got Brisbane and West Coast kicking things off, and then North Melbourne and Melbourne in that blockbuster fixture. But it's Fremantle and the Sydney Swans, which is going to be really interesting. We've got Shea Bolton playing his first game for Freo, and the Swans desperate not to slip to 0-3 under Dean Cox. What's your early take on that one?
Yeah, I think it's incredible in round 2. We've got a game that really does mean quite a lot. We've got Fremantle very disappointing on the road against Geelong last week, and then the Swans 0-3 when arguably they've played probably the 2 best teams in the competition at the moment and lost narrowly to Hawthorn and the Lions. So it's a tough road trip at any time, but when you got that sort of pressure on you going over there against a Fremantle team who are backs against the wall, we've seen Collingwood and we've seen Port Adelaide come out and sort of really the next week after a disappointing loss put on a really good performance. Will Freo fall into that category or will the Swans be 0-3? It's going to be a great matchup.
It's going to be a massive matchup. Kate, thank you so much for running us through everything, all your views and the biggest headlines in the game. That's been the round so far this week. Thank you to Amy once again. We'll see you next week.